So good afternoon. Thank you for being with us today. This is a webinar with Paymerang. It's called Are Your Business Payments Safe? And I'm just going to turn it over to the folks at Paymerang who are so gracious to be on this call. So thank you.
Great. Well, yeah, appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to join us. A little background on Paymerang. We're right here in Richmond, Virginia, working with communities around the state of Virginia and leading age members across the country to efficiently and securely pay their vendors. And on the call on our side, we have Josh Black and Sierra Lindgren, who are kind of our in-house experts when it comes to fraud and security. We're going to be sharing a little bit about what we see, as well as best practices to be mindful of when it comes to payment security. So with that, I will pass it over to Sierra.
Thanks, Nick. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. As you can see, most departments that deal with money are targeted for business email compromises. 61% of accounts payable departments are the #1 target. And this is because you're receiving so many emails and so many invoices, and most of the time these are electronic payments. So anytime you're dealing with electronic funds, changing account numbers and sending funds out, you're definitely on a target for business email compromise. These are some major headlines that we've seen in the last couple of years. As you all know, COVID-19 filled opportunity for a lot of fraudsters. Fraudsters exploit COVID-19 to scam $5.6 million from victims. These scams ranged from a gift card scam where they sent an email asking you to send a gift card to make a payment, whether it be an electricity bill or a phone bill, something like that, all the way to, as you all know, the PPP loans, the payment protection payment loans, anything having to deal with COVID relief. There were a lot of scams around COVID-19. In Virginia, locally, there was a high school that lost over $600,000 when they were scammed, when they received an email asking them to reroute payments for a football field that they were trying to put in. It was just an elaborate business email compromise scam where they received an email trying to reroute the funds to a different bank account. And the last big headline, as you all know, during COVID, a lot of people filed for unemployment. A lot of those were fraudulent unemployment claims. Washington specifically got hit really hard. They initially lost $650 million, but they were able to recover a little bit more than $300 million. So the three types of business email compromises that I'm going to go over today is a general business email compromise, a vendor impersonation, and then phishing examples. So what is a business email compromise? This is when a scam artist uses an email to dupe accounting departments into transferring funds to illegitimate accounts. They spoof URLs, they send emails pretending to be an actual legitimate vendor, and they try to reroute any bank information and any payments to a different fraudulent account. So this is an example from actually one of our clients that received an email. This is a business email compromise. They received an email from 12th Street Catering. This is actually Maggie Sherlock's email address, msherlock@12thstreetcatering.com. She's the owner of this catering company. So our client received this email. There were a lot of red flags within the email. As you can see, there's some underlying examples as far as grammatical errors, spelling errors. One big thing that we like to point out are some key words and key phrases that fraudsters like to use. One big word that we see quite often is kindly. So in the last sentence you see, please see attached for our ACH bank information for payment. Kindly have it updated on your system for future reference. And then the very last is await your response. These fraudsters want quick responses. They want you to go ahead and change that bank information and they want to confirm it. Because then what they do is they sit there, they wait for their online banking to get a deposit, they withdraw those funds immediately so those funds cannot be returned. So anytime you receive an email that's asking for a bank change or an account number change, never do that through email. It's always recommended that you actually pick up the phone and call the person that you usually speak to. Don't ever use a phone number in an email because we don't know if that phone number is a legitimate phone number or not. So what is a vendor impersonation? This is when fraudsters send fake emails to companies asking for payment. Very similar to a business email compromise, but in the next couple of slides, you'll see the big difference. So we have a vendor impersonator persona that we like to share with our employees and our clients. These are the examples of what a vendor impersonator is. They're very aggressive. They're demanding. They want the payment immediately. They're not going to stop. They'll send emails sometimes every 5 minutes to see if you've received their email, see if the payment's been sent. It's really important to just take a step back and think about the actual request, pick up the phone, call the vendor, and make sure that the request is legitimate. Bouncing isn't necessarily for all organizations, but it is for larger organizations, especially ones that have call centers or queues. What they'll do is they'll call the 1-800 number, they'll push 1 to get into one queue, they'll try to gather some information, and then they'll go and hang up, they'll call back and they'll get another queue to try to get a different person. They'll gather some more information, enough information to pass a verification. They want to be able to pass that verification to change banking information or change a payment method. Clueless. When these people call in, they'll say something like, oh, I don't know what my invoice number is. I don't have an invoice. Can you send me a copy of the invoice? One thing that we recommend is never send a copy of an invoice to a vendor that has sent you one. We have seen from clients actually send invoices over to a fraudster. That fraudster was able to make changes to that invoice and send it back. So it looked like a legitimate invoice, but the banking account information was incorrect. Usually these are very large payments. So just be really, really careful when you're getting an invoice request from a vendor that should have all of that information on hand. Last one is desperately hasty. You will see this a lot when you're going into a 3-day holiday weekend, vacation time. They'll hit you right at 4:30 on a Friday, and they want this done immediately. One of their main excuses is I'm going out of town, it's a 3-day weekend, I need my payment immediately. Always, always, always double check, make sure you're speaking to the actual vendor, pick up the phone and call. There's nothing that's so critical that that payment has to be made that day. You can always wait until after the weekend when you've had enough time to do research to make sure that it's a legitimate request. So this is an example of what a fraudster might do when it comes to a vendor impersonation. So you see the email here, it's john.kelly@company.com. If you're glancing at it, it looks like nothing's wrong with that email. But if you look a little bit closer, company spelled incorrectly. What they like to do is they like to change characters, add some characters. Another big one, they'll use a capital L for an I. Or a capital I for an L. They do that quite often. Sometimes if it's a company that has LLC, they'll change it to INC. So when you're looking at it, you see the company name, but you don't really pay attention to the very last 3 letters. So that's another trick that they usually use. But usually it's those small, subtle changes that when you're glancing at it, you don't notice. So this is an example of a vendor impersonation. This is one that our client actually received and forwarded over to us to make these banking account changes. The email is s.jackson@pharmaconnects.com. Glancing at it, I saw nothing wrong with it. Did a little bit of a deeper dive into that email address. They added an extra X. So the email address they used is at pharmaconnects with 2 X's.com, but the actual email address and the spelling of the company is PharmaConnects with 1 X. Another thing that they like to do is they like to go to these organization and businesses websites and pull a name off of the website. So Cheryl Jackson is actually the accounting professional that we would speak to. They went to the website, they pulled her name off, they were able to create this fake email, and they were able to put all of her contact information right in the bottom of that email. So our client actually thought that was really coming from Miss Jackson. So the next example is what is phishing. This is when fraudsters send fake messages. It can be through texting, it can be through email, designed to trick a human into revealing sensitive information. What this does is it allows the attacker to put malicious software on your computer, on your phone, and they're able to get credit card information, passwords, or any other secure information that you have stored on your computer. This is a perfect example of a phishing email, especially during tax season. I get them almost daily. What they'll say is your tax refund is available. It will tell you an amount. Sometimes the amount matches. Sometimes it doesn't. And there's a link on there. It's a malicious link. That link, once you click on it, it's going to download malicious software onto your computer. And they're going to be able to watch when you keystroke, when you sign into your online banking, they're able to see your username and your password. And once they're in, they're able to make transfers from your online banking to their account. That's a popular one, but they're also able to see any other information that you have stored on that computer. If you have your credit card stored to make purchases on websites, they'll have that information as well. This is another example of a phishing email and text message. Because everyone has text messaging now, a lot of them are coming through text and not email. People are phasing away from email and they're going mainly to text messaging. One big one that I get with texting all the time is my warranty for my car. They'll send a link in there saying that I need to click on the link to update my warranty. This specific one is for Apple. It will come to your phone if you have an Apple. It's Android, they'll put Android support. They want you to click on that link so they can get all of the information from your phone. And if you're anything like me, your life is stored on your phone. Passwords, mobile banking, credit card information, they have access to all of that information. The one on the left is an example of just a basic phishing email. It's an email from a CEO asking you to purchase gift cards. Never, ever purchase gift cards for anyone. Your CEO is not going to email you and ask you to purchase gift cards. You're not going to be able to pay your DirecTV or your phone bill with gift cards. This is a huge scam. What they want you to do is scratch off the back of that card. They want you to send you the card number, the CVV code, and as soon as you hit enter, they are going to deplete all of the funds from that gift card. Before I started here at Paymerang, this was one of the daily things that I saw when I worked at a financial institution. They would prey on the elderly. And the elderly would go to Walgreens, they would purchase a gift card for $1,000 to Apple, Amazon. They would give all of that gift card information over to the fraudster. That person would be out the money and the fraudster would take those funds and use them for purposes not intended. This is a little bit of a tricky one. This is one that you might receive, especially if you're expecting an email to make a payment. This one, it is a phishing email. What they're doing is they're telling you that you need to log in and pay your current bill. That update account now, when you click on that, it's going to download malicious software onto your computer. But it's not only going to do that. It's going to populate information or a web page where you can put in your credit card information. So not only are you going to have malicious software in your computer, you're also now going to have a credit card charge where it's a fraudulent charge, because they're going to say that this is actually for a phone bill, an electricity bill. Usually they use urgent payments like that, where you know that if you don't pay it, it's going to be cut off. And if you think that it's going to go to your phone or your electricity bill, but in all actuality, it's going to a fraudster. They're taking that credit card information that you entered in, and they're actually using that to purchase whatever they want, Amazon, pay one of their bills, anything like that. So when you receive an email, it's always best practice, one, to make sure that you know who the sender is. One of the best practices that we like to share is take the @ symbol, go all the way down to the end of the email and pop it in a web browser. If it comes up as a legitimate website, 98% of the time, it's a good email. If it comes up as a website that's under construction, or it comes to a GoDaddy where they want you to create a website, you definitely need to reach out to that vendor by phone from a phone number that you have on file and confirm that it was a legitimate email. So that actually concludes my portion, and it gives us a great transition into ransomware. So I'm going to actually pass it over to Josh Black, and he's going to give you a little bit more information on how to protect your organization against a ransomware attack.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So she was able to cover security, including phishing emails. However, I wanted to take a deeper dive specifically into ransomware because ransomware typically takes phishing attacks one step further, and they are becoming increasingly more popular. And there, I think there's some animation on here. So are you prepared? So after the Colonial Pipeline attack, a survey went out to see how prepared companies were against ransomware. And you'll see two key figures on the screen. 85% of businesses think that they are somewhat prepared for ransomware attack. However, 38% say that they have not conducted any training for their staff. So what is ransomware? I think it's always good to start with a streamlined definition. Ransomware is a type of malicious software designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid. Ransomware incidents can severely impact a business and can leave them without the data they need to operate and deliver mission-critical services. So now that we've operationally defined ransomware, let's take a look at a life cycle of an attack. So step one, a ransomware gang or bad actor will send out a phishing email. An employee opens the email and clicks the link or opens the document. The malware is then activated or downloaded. The bad actor will get access to data. The data would then get encrypted, and the bad actor offers to exchange the encryption key for a sum of money. Typically, it'll be Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. The company receives the key to unlock their data, and the bad actor receives the money. So to provide a realistic situation, say an employee receives an email containing an invoice for a client. It's a client that they deal with often, so they click the link, and there's an immediate pop-up that states that you can no longer access files because they are encrypted. We guarantee you can recover all of your files, but you have to submit a payment in exchange for the decryption key. Send $1 million worth of Bitcoin to the following address. Now, like with many cyber incidents, there will be a sense of urgency and a threat of compromised data. However, this is typically on a much larger scale. So here are a couple key statistics on ransomware. And a successful attack, not just an attempt, occurs every 11 seconds. The largest demand was $50 million. But outside of the demand, think about the cost of an average downtime of 22 days. It's also important to note that the US makes up almost half of all attacks. And from companies like Blacklog, who are compiling the data year over year, they're noticing that these numbers are steeply trending upward so far for the first 3 months of 2022. So ransomware in the news. Here are 3 headlines that highlight just how serious these attacks can be. When it comes to ransomware, it's not just about the requested money. It's about reputational damage as well as accessibility to services. For medical professionals, losing access to patient records or being locked out of systems, it can truly be deadly. So why do victims pay? The ransomware gangs will research a company to determine how much to charge. Typically, it'll be about 2% of annual net revenues. So again, why pay? With a countdown clock and the data locked, there'll be a sense of desperation, especially if data is not properly backed up. A company might just want to get it over with and get back to business. However, you will see that 92% of companies who pay the ransom don't get their data back. What this really means, what this really means is that some files might be corrupt or unusable. Imagine expecting a completed puzzle, but instead getting one mostly put together or a couple pieces missing. Ultimately, it may take time to get it back to the way it was. Furthermore, even if a company pays to get files decrypted, 50% of these same victims are targeted again by the same or other ransomware gangs. So to use the old adage, there's no honor among thieves. Same with ransomware. An attacker could strike again or sell your company information and the vulnerabilities to others on the dark web. So ultimately, strengthening your company's security posture is the best course of action. So before we get into the ways to help mitigate risk, here are the 5 main threats of cybersecurity: network compromise, data theft, ransomware, device attacks, and email phishing. These are not mutually exclusive. For example, ransomware often starts through a phishing email. Ultimately, these 5 threats attempt to break down something known as the CIA Triad. In this case, CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. In respect to ransomware, confidentiality could mean leaking personal and bank account information. Integrity could mean destroying the data. And availability could mean the systems are down so customers can't access their funds. So how can you protect yourself? There are many ways to help harden or improve the security posture of your organization. We have identified 5 key areas of focus: identify and remediate vulnerabilities, protecting your email, securing your endpoints, backing up sensitive and confidential data, and creating and testing recovery plans. So bad actors are always looking for weaknesses or ways to exploit a company. If antivirus software is outdated or non-existent, then malware can be installed and remain running uninterrupted. Similarly, if operating systems as well as third-party systems are not up to date, then there can be vulnerabilities bad actors can exploit to enter your endpoints or networks. Holiday weekends, that's something that Sierra mentioned as well. It might seem a little bit unusual. However, if employees are on PTO, they're going to be more distracted and more likely to click on a link on their phones. Also, businesses are potentially understaffed to effectively handle a security incident. Holidays are usually when bad actors are working overtime. And as for open source intel, what do you put on social media matters. For example, LinkedIn links people professionally, but it also has personal information available. Phone numbers, emails, addresses, and interests can all be made public information, allowing bad actors to collect lots of information about a company. So most ransomware begins with a phishing email. Use a security solution that has AI or machine learning to help identify malicious emails. The next points introduce one of the biggest vulnerabilities to company security, which is the human element. 95% of cybersecurity incidents are caused by human error. Furthermore, security awareness training reduces the risk of ransomware by 72%. So utilizing things like Outlook's phishing alert button will further reduce email or phishing emails being opened. And training employees on what to look for and how to react will greatly reduce that human error. Security awareness trainings are typically required on an annual basis or during the new hire process, but repetition is key. So instituting monthly or quarterly sessions will not only help retention of the best practices, but also showcase the company's stance on the importance of security. And finally, Microsoft Office has the ability to disable macro scripts for files transmitted through emails that can deliver ransomware. So it's not just about installing, it's also about installing and updating antivirus software on your endpoints. As new malware is developed, antivirus software is updated to recognize and block it. Use a firewall for network protection. This will stop bad traffic from hitting your endpoint networks. Only allow approved applications within your organization. Set security policies will either immediately block downloads or divert them to a security team for analysis and approval. And the last point can also be titled the principle of least privilege. Ransomware can often cannot activate without escalated privileges. So keeping security policies high and privileges low can make it even tougher for ransomware to work. One of the biggest concerns with a ransomware attack is retrieving the data. So if the data is backed up, then it can also be recovered without paying the ransom. This is not just a one-time occurrence. Ideally, you would back up your sensitive and confidential information on a consistent basis. Test the backup and restore process to make sure that if the system were to go down or become compromised, things can be back up and running in an acceptable time. Some companies might call that RTO, or the recovery time objective. Role-based access controls and multi-factor authentication can help additional layers of security. Use a 3-2-1 backup approach. What that means is save 3 copies of all critical data in at least 2 different formats and store 1 copy offline. Now, this is kind of a tried and true method. However, some experts are now saying that that may not be enough and are recommending something like a 3-2-2 or a 3-2-3, where you're saving more copies in more places in case something were to go down, you would have an available copy ready to go. "77% of organizations do not have an incident response plan." So a lot of what we've talked about is about protecting against an attack, but if it were to occur, what are the next steps? So outside of a technical action plan, a communication plan is also important. Who do you need to inform, and at what point in time? And if you have cyber insurance, what does it cover? Does it actually include ransomware? Is it enough to cover the 2% annual net revenue? And these questions could also be asked of any critical vendor that you partner with. So this slide is a good checklist of how to get started when accessing or assessing the security posture of your company. If you answer no to any of these items, step 1 would be to get with your IT team to discuss a game plan. If you answer yes, then a follow-up question might be, do you test or review this annually, or just how can we make it better? In terms of the timing of some of these items, typically an incident response or a BCP or business continuity plan would have to be reviewed annually. The network segmentation testing is about every 6 months, as well as if there are big setup changes within the network. And backups should be as recent as possible, with at least an annual test of a restoration. All right, so for the next steps here, to kind of go along with the checklist and summarize a little bit of what we've talked about, here are some resources to help improve your company's security. Patching or updating everything and often. Implementing stronger password policies and multi-factor authentication. Having software to scan, detect, and respond. Internally, we joke about being a human firewall, but certainly training employees is the easiest and cheapest way to fight ransomware. Implement the principle of least privilege to limit unnecessary escalated privileges, and having a backup strategy and testing it regularly. So I know we've covered a lot of information today, but hopefully it really inspires an internal conversation at your company to implement some of the best practices of cybersecurity. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Nick.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sierra and Josh, for sharing that valuable insight. If there's any questions, I'll kind of pause here. Feel free to ask, but here's my email and phone number. Don't hesitate to reach out if any questions come up. We're working with leading edge communities across Virginia and across the country, and can hopefully provide some valuable information to kind of help you be mindful of cybersecurity. But it looks like we are good on questions. So that will do it. Appreciate everyone again for joining us, taking the time out of their day. Greatly appreciate it.